Speaker, I rise to contribute to debate on this bill on the Waterways Authority. One of the things that I'd like to point out with this and on this bill, and I attended one of the hearings for this bill during the committee process, but what strikes me in reading the report and listening today that there are a number of failures in the process here that's been run by the LNP, and I'll talk about some of these failures. Now, what's been very clear after reading the reports is there's a failure of a requirement for consultation with First Nations communities, and that's come through very strongly from reading those submissions and having a look at those transcripts. There's been a failure to commit to consultation with the Kabi Kabi. They do not have that rock solid commitment. They do not have what they need in terms of commitment. And it was very interesting to see that the Kabi Kabi Corporation, the traditional owners, were not consulted in the drafting. In the drafting of this, they were not consulted. Like everyone else, they presented with the finished product. And I'll also point out that there was a request from the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation for consultation. That was just simply ignored. So you've got this failure of consultation or require to consult with our First Nations people. Now, what I find about this is that remember that native title is a property right. It's a property right enjoyed by Queenslanders. So we've got a class of property right holders that are being ignored in the construction of this bill and this Waterways Authority. And I think that should raise alarm bells for some of the LNP members over here when you've got a group of property right owners who are being ignored. The member from Maroochydore said quite rightly that the people up in the area there are custodians of the waterways. What I would say is consult with all your custodians, consult with the traditional owners, with the custodians of those lands and waterways as well. It is a basic thing that needs to be done in the construction of this bill. Now, another failure that I've seen in this bill as well, and there's a failure to consult meaningfully with the public, and that came through once again through reading those submissions and having a look at those transcripts. Can I point out the department staff confirmed in a hearing that there was no public consultation prior to drafting. No public consultation prior to drafting. And it's very clear that the local organisations and locals have been concerned about that lack of community engagement in arriving at this point to create the bill, to create the authority. And it is no wonder that they're calling out for greater board representation. The councils, my own council, is calling out for greater representation to be on this board. The environment and community groups want to be a part of it. They want to be on the board. They want to make sure that they are consulted and that they have a voice. It is no wonder then that we see that theme running through these submissions, that they have little faith in the ability of this government to consult and to make sure their voices are heard. And that, I think, is another failure of this bill process. Another interesting failure that we've seen here is that failure to consider those key federal environmental legislation in the creating this bill. Once again, that's come through in the report, the submissions. It's a really important thing to do, but it's a glaring oversight in the creation of this authority. Can I point out, and as we have all heard, it's a very sensitive area. It's adjacent to Moreton Bay Ramsar site. It's at the end of, I represent an area at the end of Palmerstone Passage, very sensitive area as well. Palmerstone Passage is something that many of us have grown up along and have known well. I did a lot of growing up along Bribie Island and swimming in Palmerstone Passage. It is very sensitive. The federal legislation is there to protect those key values. It is really important to not ignore that federal legislation, and it's a failure, and what the LNP have done so far is that they have ignored or overridden or just not taken any notice of this key federal legislation. And I do want to point out, this has come through as well, there's that failure to define what is sustainability or sustainable use. The bill does not define those, and I think it's a failure of the bill and an oversight that they have not done that. Now, one of the things, just a final point on some of the failures that I think the LNP have done in the creation of this bill, and that's a failure to account for the costs that may well be incurred by this authority. And what I am talking about is a failure to establish a substantial annual budget for dredging. And this was once again something that came through from the hearings. They really will need a substantial amount of money to manage that annual dredging and to manage the infrastructure that they will be overseeing or that will be associated with them. We heard today, and we've heard that the work done at the tip of Bribie, it's well over $20 million, well over $20 million. Work with dredging and moving around is actually quite substantial. It is very costly to do this work. One of the reasons I know this, when I was on the Caboolture Council, and I've talked about this in the hearings, is that annual cost of dredging those canals along the Palmerston Passage, absolutely massive. But not only that, it's that it was the upkeep of the infrastructure involved with that as well. It is a large amount of money. It was confirmed. What was concerning is that the authority said, well, if it's beyond the amount that we've got for maintenance or some maintenance dredging, we have to go to Treasury. We have to go to Treasury if we want to get that substantial amount of money. And what I'm suggesting, it's from my experience, is that there will be a lot of pressure to do more dredging with this Waterways Authority, oversee that as well. They are going to have to keep going back to Treasury to get that money, and there will be a substantial amount of money, and this authority will be left standing on their own, going to Treasury, having to beg for money all the time for maintenance dredging, annual dredging, and all those other associated costs that we have seen so far being incurred in the work that's being done. And not only that, what I found interesting is that the department hadn't gone to the local council for their indicative costs of dredging as well. It's the local councils that have so far been burdened with this cost of dredging and maintenance of these waterways as well. There's some areas there that councils do have to do. So they're the ones that they're the ones with the expertise. So I suggest this Waterways Authority are going to have to talk to council about the cost of dredging that councils do, and talk to the Moreton Bay Council about this as well. I talked to Moreton Bay Council as well. They've got the experiences of dredging around Palmerston Passage. Now, what we have seen, I think, is obviously there's a bill that is establishing this waterway is an election commitment, but what I kept seeing when we looked at this process was that a failure to plan properly, a failure to consult, a failure to take on board what the people want in the area as well, and a failure to adequately budget for their operations. So I think it's more than a failure, it's a disregard as well. It's a disregard that the LNP have taken through this process. A disregard for the public servants, a disregard for the people who live in the area, for the wishes of the councils as well, for the wishes of the council as well, who want to be on the board, and all those environmental groups there. Thank you.